Hey everyone, welcome to Ellis Mowers. I appreciate y'all watching the channel as always. We're going to today use one of the HIPA parts, carburetors, to fix this. This is a 20-inch weed trimmer, but the premise, it's not really the application, it's the engine. So it's got one of them Tecumseh engines on it, one of the newer ones, so to speak, not the old ones. From like the 80s and whatnot, but the ones that have the air filter behind the carburetor instead of kind of sitting on top of the shroud. So they're still fairly common. They haven't been made for about 14 years, 15 years now, since Tecumseh went bankrupt around 2008. But there's still a bunch of parts, and there's quite a few engines still around that I come across that are Tecumsehs. So I figured this video would help out a lot. Again, HIPA has generously provided the parts for me. I've done about 6 or 7 of their 2-cycle equipment. This is the first 4-cycle equipment carburetor that I have used. The 2 cycles work great. Right now, if you're watching this during the first week that I have this out, until May 4th, they have a 30% off promotion going on for some of their big brands like Steel, Honda, and Husqvarna aftermarket carburetors. So if you check out the website, hipastore.com, I'll link the description, in the description below, I'll link the carburetor to this particular Tecumseh, because I know a lot of people are going to see this after this. But if you want to order it off of hipastore.com, if there is a link below to this specific carburetor, above it is a link to, it's like an affiliate link, like Amazon affiliates almost, except for their website. If you buy it using that link, if you buy any carburetor using that link, I get a little bit of a cut on that as well. I'd appreciate any help if you buy anything from HIPA. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started on this weed trimmer, or just basically replacing Tecumseh carb. If you have any questions about this video or any video you see on the channel, you can reach out to me, Ellis at ellismowers.com, or at ellismowers09 on Instagram and Facebook. Let's go ahead and get right into this. So I always start off by showing you what's in the kit before we get started. And I also want to mention, while I'm thinking about it, there's a viewer to the channel, Justin Mater. He has commented on many of these HIPA videos that he's bought a bunch of these parts for certain applications, and they've worked great for him. So thank you, Justin, for that recommendation, and for recommending HIPA as well. They're good aftermarket parts. They go a little bit extra than kind of your cheap bargain basement aftermarket folks. This is what comes in it. So this originally is for like a Toro personal pace super recycler, but as you can see, it works just fine on this engine as well. The only difference you need to check is, does it have this type of air filter, or does it have, let me show you, this type of air filter that's just a small canister. They do vary, so just kind of be wary. This will only work on the long air filter housing. These will actually work on both. So this particular kit that I have in the description and for this video has this air filter on it. So the longer air filter. What it also comes with is actually quite a few things, like the whole tune-up kit. So you have fuel line, as you can see here, a fuel filter, as you can see here, primer bulb, bunch of fuel line connectors, a bunch of them, the carburetor already with the primer bulb on it, so you get an extra primer bulb, which is cool. A spark plug, which we'll throw in there. It's a Savior B6SE, and a gasket. That'll go between your carburetor and your intake pipe right there. So, let me grab the tools needed. I'll show you how I do this, and we'll do this in real time. I know some people do quick step-by-steps. I like to kind of be more of a narrative and show everything as I do it. So, let me get everything out of the package. Let me grab some hand tools that I need, and we will go from there. So you can accomplish a lot of this with a Phillips head screwdriver. First thing we're going to take off is this plastic back cover here, and we might. Oh, there we go. As long as you can get it to pop, you're good. All you gotta do is take off this screw, this other screw inside, screw number 2. Again, this setup is going to be the same for your Toro push mower, some Craftsman push mowers. I think some Yardmans even have this. You see that there is a gasket right here. You may need this gasket. I didn't see it in the kits. I'll double check. But you will need this gasket to put right here on this tube. In the intake area. It actually goes on the back of this. So keep that. Now, let's see if we're going to get lucky or if we're going to get screwed, one of the two. This has a throttle cable set up on it too. Yours may not. But what we're going to do is take off, see if we can take off these intake bolts. I usually like going through the intake bolts because if I can take this whole intake off, it allows me a lot better access to this carburetor. So these are Phillips head screwdrivers, or screws. And as long as you don't want to take the exhaust off, you can get by without having to take the exhaust off. If you can take a Phillips screwdriver and get into this top bolt. The bottom bolt's easy to get to. But then you're running up against, I think they're 3/8, but you're running up against this intake pipe. So you kind of either want to try that or you got to get the wrench out. Luckily for me, the intake popped off with this Phillips head screwdriver. We're going to take both of these out here. Both of the screws out and set them aside. Okay. So now, next order of business is, I believe we got to get this off, which is my throttle cable. Depending on the setup that we have, we might actually get rid of this, but that's unbeknownst to this video. I'm going to take these two screws off, and then I will rejoin y'all after that, because it's not, a lot of applications are not going to have this with this type setup. Let me do this just in case. I've taken these screws off. This throttle setup is a little bit different, but still kind of what you'll be dealing with. You'll have the throttle piece, throttle cable that goes over to the engine. So the throttle cable that goes over to the engine is going to go on top in this engine. Some engines you may go on the bottom, because a lot of engines have the auto throttle feature on them. And what they do is, I'll do my best to explain it since it's not in front of me, but you'll have this right here will kind of look the same, the one going to the actual throttle mechanism itself here, or to the carburetor itself. You'll have another one that's going to be going to like a little rod that extends off of this. This goes under, so to speak. You can kind of see it indents on this one as well, so that your throttle cable can go forward. That's the best way I can explain it to you without having it in front of me. This application is a little bit different because it's got an actual throttle cable, and so it actually, for me, makes it a little bit easier because I'm just going to push in this throttle rod and take it out, and I don't have to do any finagling like I usually have to do with Tecumsehs. If you've ever worked on one of these Tecumsehs that has the auto throttle, so to speak, y'all know what I'm talking about. So I just took the throttle rod out here. Remember the way that this one goes. You've got the big up and around, and it goes in the top here, and then it comes around and hooks in at this hole on the carburetor. That's going to be the same premise for whatever application you use. Your linkages may be a little bit different. You just have to look at it before you take it off. Take a picture of it, and then just go from there. So we're going to replace the fuel line as well because this fuel line is really bad. I'm just going to go ahead and pull this off. Make sure you don't lose the bolts like I'm trying to do here. And we'll pull this fuel line off and see how bad it is. Alright, so you can see this fuel line is really, really bad. A lot of the failure points on these carburetors are not really so much inside the jet. They're this primer bulb. They start getting hot and they start sucking air in. And when I found out that I can get aftermarket carburetors for, you know, $12, $15, I think this one may be closer to 20 since it's a tune-up kit and all that good stuff with it, I went that route. The reason why I take intake pipes off of these is because this bolt back here is really hard to access if you don't. So now what I've got to do is get a 3/8 inch on this side, 7/16 inch wrench on this side, and we're going to take this intake pipe off. We'll scrape the gasket off, and we will assemble it. So let's get started with that. Alright, let's do it right here. I've got a 3/8 on this Milwaukee. If you just have a ratchet and socket, it works just fine too. I'll take it off of this nut. Just lay it on my hardware aside so that I know where it is. Do the same thing on the other side. We don't even need to save the fuel line or anything, because HIPA has provided us with some. Yeehaw! Alright, let's take this off. And that disconnects the intake pipe. Now, you would be sitting here for not hours, but quite a bit of time trying to get this off. A lot of times you don't even need to worry about replacing this gasket, but we're going to anyways. Man, this never happens this easy. This thing's coming right off. A lot of times you got to do some scraping and stuff, but there you go. So remember, there's the gasket. And so we can essentially throw this away because we're not going to use this anymore. Just got old gas and stuff, and Tecumseh carburetors in particular are ones that I do not mess with when it comes to that. They have burned me so many times over the years trying to get them cleaned and fixed that I just opted for new ones, and every time I get a new one, it works beautifully. So we put that gasket in between. Now we're going to push this in. Now I do want to mention that the inside bolt, if you have a Toro or an auto throttle setup, will have that arm that controls the throttle in on the side of the intake pipe side of the of this setup here, and you will have to put that rod back in when you put this bolt in, if that makes any sense. I wish I had another Tecumseh to use this on, but I'll do my best to explain it to you. So we're going to put these bolts back in, just like so. And bolt number 2. Y'all know the struggle. Throw things around. So I'm going to tighten those up. Make sure you don't cross thread. Let me tighten these up and I'll be right back and we'll put this thing back on, alright? Let me show you a common mistake that I just did. That probably is going to be common. Same bolt size, these are the intake bolts. Do not put the ones that have the Phillips head in the intake, in between the intake and the carb. Those are not the ones that you need. You'll be greeted with cross-threaded nuts, or nuts that do not thread into them. So please remember that. So we're going to put these in. I'm going to impact them in just like so. Maybe even torque them down with a wrench. You just want to make sure, either way you want to make sure that seal in between the two is tight. And looks like we've got a nice tight seal. We'll go right here again, because this one slipped just because I'm crazy. There we go. Definitely in there now. Now, what I like to do now, we'll go ahead and get over here. Go ahead and connect the throttle wire back up. Remember, it goes into this hole right here. And then up and under, actually up and under your throttle cable. Or is it up and over? This one is up and over. Your auto throttle setups are going to be up and under. Come on, buddy, you know you want to go. The hole is hard to get into sometimes. There we go. I think at this point I'm going to go ahead and put these screws back on. I mean, this process is not hard at all, because everything is nice and exposed. And that is the case for most of these applications for the Tecumseh engines. Everything's generally pretty nice and exposed, so you don't have to take a lot of stuff off in order to get to it. Some of the engine covers you may have to, depending on what you have. And we'll get the 5/16. I've got that right here. We'll just screw everything in. I think I might have done this wrong. Let's see. No, I did it correctly. Just checking the throttle cable setup there. And so we're going to screw these back in. Screw, screw, screw. Okay. Now we will hook everything up here. So this one has a ground plug. It looks like it tries to come unplugged relatively easily, so we'll get it in there. How about we get it in there after we get the thing screwed back in? That looks like that's going to be the easiest thing to do. You know, I've done many of these carbs. It's just, I don't do them often enough to have everything fully memorized, especially that linkage. That linkage stuff is some of the hardest to get right, and especially because this one's actually a little bit different than what I thought. So you can slide those bolts back in under the exhaust. Now that we've got it kind of secured, I'm going to fit my fingers in here and see if I can plug this back in. I have to get y'all out of the way for a second. So this is the stop. This is the throttle stop. Since the lever engages the weed trimmer itself, you have the throttle stop to cut the throttle off whenever you're done. So, which I do need to do some adjustment to, it looks like. But that's not the purpose of this. We'll hook our intake pipe back up as well on the back of the carb. Tighten these screws down. Boom. And number 2. And you may need to, if you do it this way, you may need to purchase a separate gasket in order to get the intake back right again. So we're good to go. That's not coming off on my watch anymore. Now, the best thing to do now is a fuel line. If you still have, well, we'll put the fuel filter on it too, actually. How about that? So let's get, since they provided it to us, we don't have to use the extra primer bulb. Let me grab my pliers and everything I need, and we'll put this fuel line on. Alright, y'all, so the tightest portion of this fuel line is in the back here. And there's a pretty short run, and so actually putting a fuel filter on this, it's not going to be difficult, but we just have a little room to work with. So we're gonna see what we can do, because you know, it's never bad to put a fuel filter on something. So let's take that. I would say if I didn't put the fuel filter on, I'd just say match up your fuel line to what you had previously. Let's see if we can just cut it right about here. May let it droop down a little bit to see if that'll work better. Fuel line's pretty decent. It slid right on very well on that carburetor. So Tecumseh fuel line sometimes is can be a little bit finicky depending on what line you're working with, just because of the openings and whatnot. Alright, so we're going to put that on. I can never get the direction of these things right to save my life. It's got a screen on each side, so just put your filter on. A lot of times they go big to little, if I remember right. These little cheap fuel filters don't really matter. It's when you get into the fuel pump type engines and when it really starts mattering more. So this might prove to be a little bit difficult because we've got to make that run up there now. Oops, let's go this way with it. We'll attach the fuel line. I just want to see if this will work first off. So we'll put that on. See what we've got here. I think we're going to be okay. Cut it off about right there. That looks like about where we need to be. One thing I can think of is that it might mess with the governor. Not really. It's kind of a nice touch that they added a fuel filter to this kit, especially if you are a homeowner who just wants to do this in your garage at home, and not like me who does this on the side and fixes, I don't know, I've done upwards of 150 items a year in 1 year before. Just kind of depends on what you want to do yourself. Personally, I don't think a fuel filter is needed. However, HIPA provided it, which is kind of nice to have one in the kit. And we're going to put it on. See if we can make it work. Connect these fuel line clamps. Push this up and over into the gas tank. The gas tank one's always a little bit, because the gas tank inlet's a little big, so. Come on, buddy. May have cut the line a little short. Slide on there for me. Kind of think I'm kind of dealing with the bend of the line here. Trying to think this thing slid on. Again, the gas tank inlet is a little bit bigger on these Tecumsehs too, so that's, you also get to struggle with that a little bit. I think we've got it on decently secure. Let's grab a grab this, make sure we're not going to be pulling off. I think we're good. One thing you want to make sure that you're not having is any kinks. So we got the fuel filter in fine. Is it affecting the governor? No. So we got the fuel filter in. You want to make sure you don't have any kinks in the line. When you have a line, when you have a run this short and have something like a fuel filter that takes up that much room when it comes to straight space, it does make it a little bit harder to get it situated, but we got it just fine. So the last part of this is we've got to we've got to put the air filter on, and this may pose a problem with the fuel filter. So what we're gonna do, we've got to get this on. Yeah, this fuel filter, unfortunately, just because of the nature of this setup, is not really gonna work, it looks like, unless we routed it really far down, which we could attempt to do. I mean, we could try that, but this setup that I did is not going to work. So maybe I'd just say forget the fuel line or the fuel filter, but you could do whatever. I did show you how you're supposed to install this fuel line, so I think I'm just going to take this off and install just a regular fuel line without the filter. Save the fuel filter for another application down the line. What do y'all think? So I'm going to take this off, and I'll rejoin you once I get the regular fuel line in, and we'll put the air filter on. All right, guys. So I've got the fuel line in without the filter now, and that way we've got the ability to put the air filter on without having impedance with this. You are going to put the gasket on, this O-ring gasket, which I have lost. Let me find it. Right down here. Okay. So, put the O-ring gasket on this. We're going to kind of pull around the red tube here and slide one of these bolts in, one of these screws. Screw it in just so that we can get started here. I'll get the other one in as well. You might have to pull this red tube back in order to get what you want to get in. But there we go. So you'll see it push in right there. We'll make sure our gasket is sealing, and it is. Just get them snug. You don't have to tighten them down too crazy. Because they are aluminum threads, so you don't want to, like I said, go crazy on them. Okay. Now, we'll take our old air filter, which is what I showed you like this. Woo! Put in the new one. You can feel the difference in the weight of it too, because it doesn't have all that dirt in it. Okay, so now we just push it in like so and twist it. And twist. It can get tricky because it's going to try and resist you in a couple of areas, from what I have learned a lot. But once you get it on, you know that you're on. So now while I'm here, let's go ahead and put this, the last thing we got is this spark plug, right? So the one in it's probably fine. We've been given a new one. Why not use it? I do want to mention that some of these savior plugs, one of them in a 2-cycle application didn't work very well on a Mantis tiller. The other ones, I mean, this plug looks clean anyways, but the other ones that I've used have worked just fine. So these can be hit and miss. Usually I say, I mean, it comes with the kit, but usually I say if the plug's working, don't bother it. So that's in. So let me get it down. I'll put gas in it, check the oil, make sure that it's got some oil in it, and we'll see how this thing runs. After I check the gas tank, let me check the gas tank to make sure it's fairly clean. And it is. So usually these plastic Tecumseh gas tanks don't have issues. So let me get it down, put some gas in it, we'll see how it runs. Alright guys, we got the new setup going. Let's prime it a few times to see if it'll crank. One thing I do want to mention, you do hear it surge a little bit. Remember, this doesn't have a load on it like a mower, so it has to be almost perfect in order for it to not surge. As you can hear it full throttle, it's doing just fine. Let me test the weed trimmer function while I'm here. Doing that, but I don't know if I can show it to you whenever I engage it. You see how the throttle smooths out? So I'm going to let it run a little bit. We'll wrap this video up. Alright guys, I got this a little bit more presentable for the camera. I went ahead and replaced this. But you will hear this thing does surge, and like I said, it's because there's no load on the engine whenever it's running until you engage the weed trimmer portion of it there. See, that you got to remember that when it comes to this. If you put this on a mower, it should work just fine because you've got that centrifugal force of the blade, as long as your blade is good. But when it comes to this, you're talking about a universal carburetor that's supposed to be on a lawnmower. I put on a weed trimmer, so it's not going to be 100% perfect. But any aftermarket carb like this is I'll say this much. It's probably going to be impossible to find the exact carburetor to go on this. A lot of the stuff is just the generic stuff with the pre-drilled holes and whatnot now. So it's just probably just a minuscule difference. But let me run it and we'll wrap this up. Like I said, what counts is when I engage the weed trimmer portion, it smooths out. So yeah, there it is. That is this weed trimmer. Again, I want to say thank you to HIPA for sending me that part. Remember, they have, if you're viewing this before May 4th of 2022, they are having that 30% off Springfest sale on Honda, Steel, and Husqvarna in particular, if you have a weed trimmer that you need for that. Again, all this needed was a carburetor replacement and just you know, replacing all the main parts of it, and we're running again, so that's good. It's what I find with these Tecumseh engines. Just remember that you do have that linkage difference if you are doing this on a Toro push mower, which is what this carb is specifically for, and your air filter, depending on what type of mower you have or device you have, may be the small canister air filter instead of the big one like is on this. So again, just those minor differences. Again, the throttle linkages as well, with that throttle arm that you will see if you take it off of your mower, and it's the auto throttle setup and not the throttle cable setup like I've got. So a couple of minor differences, nothing crazy. The premise is the same, and I hope y'all saw how relatively easy it is to do one of these changes. I think if you're a homeowner, you can probably do it at home if you have basic tools at home, and you have an older weed trimmer, mower, gosh, anything with a vertical shaft that comes the engine on it, maybe even a pressure washer, who knows, because these are starting to get a little old, and the original carbs, I'm sure, are failing, especially at the primer bulb. Best solution that I have found is to just simply get a new one, and the HIPA parts provided me with this. And again, we're like 7 for 7 on HIPA part stuff, so we're doing pretty good so far. Again, in the description below, if you click that link at the very top, it will take you to my affiliates page, and you can buy off of that, and I get a little bit of a cut. I'll also put the direct link down to this carburetor below that link as well as their Amazon website as well, or the Amazon store. So again, thank you for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed this video, found it informative, and thank you again, HIPA, for providing me with the carburetor and for just being able to make this informational video for y'all, which helps everybody out. You, me, and HIPA. And I'll catch y'all in the next video. Again, we're cranking things out here Wednesday and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern time here on the channel. And if you have any questions about the video, you can reach out to me, Ellis, at ellismowers.com, or at ellismowers09 on Instagram and Facebook. And I will see y'all on the next one. Take care.